to.
It's cool. Easy. It's running now. You can go ahead. It's recording.
Okay, perfect. So today, for today's class, we're going to talk about just changes that happen within the grids. Most of what you're going to see will look highly familiar. The general concept stays the same. You know, we still have our grids. We still have the ability to hide and show columns. But there are some changes that I think are definitely worth going over. So just for an example, I'm going to go ahead and choose work with retailers and dive into that topic first. The first thing to point out is that, and I don't remember if I did this in V11 or not, to be perfectly honest, but if we look over here, under retailer, the category, the folder I should say, work with retailers is now located there. In V11, it was split off into its own section at the bottom. So we've categorized that how it logically should be categorized. So this is now under the retailer section. Also under work with retailers, if we expand the arrow over here, we're going to see all of the views that we've created. So if we want to open up directly to one view, they're all located right underneath that. Similarly to V11, if we wanted to, we can drag any of those views to our dashboard. If we wanted to just launch directly into that, we can do that. So that option still remains the same. So what has changed? So when we get into any of these grids, there's going to be certain similarities regardless of if we're in work with orders, work with retailers, work with products, work with loads, etc. So we retain this grid format, as you can see. One of the big things to point out right off the bat is this blue line right here. So if I start scrolling over to the right, you'll notice that everything to the left of the blue line, so the DBA name and the retailer ID, those stay locked in place. So we added this functionality, which I'm sure you've seen if you work in Excel at all, where you can lock columns in place essentially. And to do that, it's as simple as just clicking and holding down on the heading, dragging it over to the left, and now that column is locked. Similarly, if I wanted to move a column so that it wasn't locked, I can go ahead and click down, drag it to the right of that blue line, and it's not going to be locked. This can come in particularly handy, and I think one of the best spots for it is within work with retailers or work with products, where you may be scrolling all the way over to the right, and within work with retailers, if you're showing all of your columns, I think we have upwards of 150 columns that could be displayed, something like that. You may lose track of which DBA is which line. But now that we have the option to go ahead and lock stuff in place, we don't need to worry about it. We have, it really eliminates the chance of us losing which line we're working with. Okay. So really cool, exciting new feature. People really like the option to be able to lock things in place. And as I was saying before, it helps with data accuracy. A couple of other things to point out. So similar functionality, if I double click on a line, it's going to go ahead and show me that information. If I were to go in and make a change to this, let's say I wanted to change it to values with an S at the end. And if I hit enter, it'll bring me down to that next line. So I could keep on going through. So we're automatically bumping you into that cell edit mode, which is a bit of a change. You used to have a different format if you wanted to do a column update. Now it automatically puts you into that. You'll notice once you change something, it gets this green font with the little corner marked off over here. And if I were to skip over something, let's take this Brook Park Road for example. If I skip over these aren't going to get that change. Once all those changes are made, I could go ahead and click Save All, and it will put those changes into effect. Okay. Couple of other things to note within here. I do want to show that if I were to go in and go into the short stack button, we have our additional options. If we click on that, the first thing we come to is hide show columns. So this operates very similarly to how it has in the past, where I could go ahead and start clicking on certain things that I might want for a particular view. So let's say for this example, I wanted my licensing information included in here and it wasn't before. I can click on those checkboxes, hit done. It will reconfigure that grid. And now when I scroll over to the right, you'll see right here, I have license number 3, number, and license expiration date. And if these were populated, that information would show right there. Okay. So since I've rearranged certain columns and added certain columns, I've altered my view. And in doing so, it marks off this view button with a little asterisk next to it. Anytime you see this little asterisk right here, that means that you have modified your view. And that may be something that you were doing in just a one-off situation, or you may be creating views from scratch. So in this case, I added a couple columns and I want to make a licensing view. So what I would do is click on this button, go down to Save As, and I can name it whatever I want.
I could be there at 8:30.
For this example, I'll name it Licensing and click Save. When I do that, you'll notice that over here, I have my basic retailer search, which was what I originally came into, and now it's opened up a tab called Licensing to show that I am within that view right now. You'll also notice over to the left-hand side of the screen, underneath Work with Retailers, we now have licensing as an option. So very simple, very easy to create a view, also very easy to go ahead and add and remove certain columns. In terms of filtering data, we have a couple different options of how we can approach that. First option is exactly what you were doing before, where we can click on this search box, and if I wanted to see everything that had Pleasant in a street address, I could go ahead, type that in, and it's going to filter all of my data down. You'll notice when I do that, this filters button right here is showing 1 in parentheses. So I've applied 1 filter, so that's exactly what it's picking up. So when I click on this, it's going to show me all of the different filters that I currently have. Now, one of the new enhancements that we've done within V13 is if you go ahead and click on Add a Filter, you can come in here and start searching for your column that you want to filter on next. So if you wanted to show everything with where the street address contains Pleasant, and you want to filter on another column at the same time, you can do that. So in the past, you would have to go and scroll over and find that column. And again, going back to what I was saying before, if your view contains 100 columns, that can be a bit laborious and kind of trying to find a needle in a haystack to a certain extent if you're scrolling through all of those. If I were to come in here, though, instead, I could start typing in a keyword. So I could put in license expiration date 3, and then it gives me a few different options here. So in this case, I'm dealing with a date, so I can say where the date is equal to a particular date, but we've also included new options. So if I click on this drop down, instead of doing is, I can say greater than, less than, is not, and so on and so forth. But one of the most exciting ones, in my opinion, is we've included this range for a lot of our different date categories. So if I wanted to see everything with a license expiration date is within a range of this week, the last 7 days, the month to date, and you can read the rest of them that are appearing on the screen, we can now do that. So it's a new added functionality. It's really easy to use, but it can really help you get your data down to exactly what you wanted to do. So I certainly encourage people to take advantage of, the range for any of these date categories. If I come in here and I want to clear all my filters, it's as simple as just clicking this Clear Filters button. It's going to go ahead and remove anything that I've applied for filters thus far, and I'm starting, kind of from scratch within my view again. One of the other things to point out is when you were in V11, if you were going into work with retailers or work with products, it would originally bring you into a quick search, and then from there you could go into a grid if you want. In V13, we made the change to bring you into your grid initially. We found that most people were not utilizing the quick search and they'd rather look at their data in that grid view. However, if you did want to do a quick search, we do still have the button right here. So we could go ahead and click on quick search. And then we can say, where do we want to, or which retailer do we want to search for in this particular instance? And then what do we want to open to? So we have different categories, which we can touch on at a later time, of what you would want to open to. That will change between products and retailers. But we do still have that quick search functionality. It's just embedded within the grid. Okay. A few other things to point out. Within this short stack, we've consolidated a few other sections. So show deleted is now within here. So this would be particularly applicable within work with products and work with retailers, where you may have deleted accounts, you may have deleted items, and generally speaking, you're not going to want to have to deal with them. In the event that you do, you click on that show deleted button and they'll show up with kind of this pinkish background on the line. Refresh. If someone is going in and creating a new retailer on another computer and you're not seeing it yet, you may just have to click refresh to see the most current data. Where this comes in particularly handy is within work with orders, which may sound foreign now. We're going to be touching on how work with orders works in another class. But if you were in work with orders, for example, and you have orders coming in consistently all day long, If you click on that refresh button, it's going to show you the most current up-to-date data of what you have in the system for entered orders or routed orders for that matter. So definitely a useful tool. Export functions the same exact way that it did in V11, where we can export to Excel and CSV. You will notice from time to time that Excel is grayed out. There are size limits with Excel. And if it's too large of a set of data to export into Excel, you can do a CSV instead. If you export to CSV, it actually opens it up within Excel anyway, so you're essentially doing the same function. The audit log functions the same way that it did in V11. It's a really handy tool to, first of all, hold people accountable for the changes that they're making, but also just see what's been going on in the system. So I can go in here and track, this column was changed by this user at this time, and it was changed from this value to that value. Also gives you the opportunity to revert changes that you may see within there as well. So definitely a handy tool to have. And last but not least, within here we have the help section. And I cannot stress enough how important the help is within the web. We've spent a lot of time at VIP really making this, what we consider to be a very handy tool. So within here, in this case, I'm in work with retailers, so it opens up directly to here, but we have different help text for work with orders, for work with loads, for reconcile loads, and so on. So any information that you may need will be held within here. We also have videos, which are extremely helpful. So if there's something that you may be a little confused about with maintaining routing for a retailer, you can click on this and you'll see it's just a 2-minute and 32-second video that'll pop up. You can watch it. It'll kind of help coach you through what you would need to do, in this case with routing. We do also have using the grid, so essentially what I'm covering today. This will show up right here if you need any more help, and our general help is right here as well. The related topics are things that you may be doing within here. So if you need information on deleting a retailer or adding a retailer, in this case, you can click on those buttons. The Z-Control settings one is very cool. For more of the power users who may have the authority to change the Z-Control, all of that is held within here. So it'll say these are the possible Z-Controls that could be affecting the data that you're viewing within this grid. And last but not least, we have the technical specs, which again, that's going to be more of the system administrators and VIP. But if there's something where you needed to know which file is this pulling information from, it will show you those tables that are being updated right here. So particularly helpful for system admins who may be pulling reports through a third-party tool, and also helpful for VIP internal just to see what is being affected within a particular grid. Now, a couple of other things, don't have a whole lot more left, but over on the left-hand side of the screen, you will notice that it looks considerably different from what you're used to seeing in V11. We do have a few different options here. So we have the this middle button I'll touch on first. This is our view details. So if I go ahead and click on that, in this case, since I'm in work with retailers, it's going to bring me directly into my profile of a retailer. So this is your easiest way. If you want to go directly to a profile, you click on that view details, it opens you up right to that spot. Now, once you're within a particular profile, we used to have in V11, over on the left-hand side of the screen, they would have the different tabs kind of laid out on the side. We decided to consolidate that just to make it look a little cleaner, a little prettier whenever you're within any section that has multiple tabs to it. And you just come up here and you can click on Profile, and it will show you the other areas that you may need to go into. So accounts receivable, comments, invoice splits, so on and so forth. And you could click on any of those options and it would bring us directly into that. Now the other option is that we have this little blue button over here. So this blue button is what we call our menu selection option. So if I go ahead and click on this, this is essentially prompting me with all of those same tabs, except it's letting me open directly to it right from the grid. So if I wanted to go into my invoice splits, I could go ahead and do that. If I wanted to open up directly into routing, I could go ahead and do that. So really you're bypassing that step of going into a profile first and then locating where you want to go from there. So that's just one less screen to load. We've also included, in the case of retailers, we've moved copy to right here. So if we want to copy from this retailer and create a new one from right here, we can look at the audit log within here, and then we can also make a delete to a record from within here. Okay. Now, one of the last things we can do is if we use this actions button up here, you'll notice this is grayed out right now. And as soon as I check off any of these checkboxes over here, oops, grab one, you'll notice I can now click on this. So when I do, I have a few different options. Do I want to delete what I'm working with, or do I want to do an update? And before I jump into the update, I just want to point out, previously, if you were doing a mass update on a set of data, what you would need to do is go into the heading and you come over to this drop-down arrow. And right in here, it would show you an option to do an update multiple, as we called it. Well, we've kind of redone how the update multiple works. So let me just filter down to show a better idea of how this could work logically. So if I have my data filtered down to what I want to update, what I'm now doing in order to perform an update multiple is coming over here. And you'll notice I have this one checkbox that's a little further up from the rest. If I click on this, it will check off every single box within here. Okay, now from here I can go into my actions, I can select update, and I can define what do I want to update about all of these retailers. So if it were the DBA name, I could do that. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and filter down to license expiration date. From there, I could type in what I want my value to be, what I want for all of these records to be updated to, and I could go ahead and perform my update. Now, a couple of the big areas of functionality where this is a lot handier than how it was in V11. So one would be, we have this update another field button right here. So I can go ahead and click on this. And I believe at this point we can update up to 10 fields at the same time. So if I click on update another field, I could find the different field over here that I want to update. Over here, I could define what I want to update it to. And I could do, 4 update multiples in this case at the same time, as opposed to doing one, then going through the grid and finding the other column and doing it again and again and again. I can do everything at one time instead. But what I think is probably the most exciting part of the new checkbox method, rather than doing the column update, how we would before with going into the column right here, is that when you're filtering down your data to perform a mass update, there's a certain point where you filter down your data as much as you possibly can, and you can't get it down, filtered down any more than what it is. But what will happen frequently is someone may have filtered down their data to 500 retailers, and that's as far down as they can get it. But really, they only wanted to do this update on, let's say, 450 of those retailers. Well, in V11, you would kind of be faced with a situation where you have to either go in manually and update those 450, or what would most commonly happen was people would narrow it down to the 500 retailers, then they would do a mass update. Then after the fact, they would have to remember to go back in and change those 50 retailers that weren't supposed to be hit back to the original value. Well, with the checkbox method, we allow you to, in this case, I checked everything off, but I can go in here and unselect certain retailers in particular that I don't want to update. So this is really huge for data accuracy. As I was saying before, if you went and updated the 500 and you really only wanted to hit 450, there's a personal responsibility now to have to go back and remember which retailers you didn't want to change and go and change them back. We take care of that for you now, where you can go in and uncheck whatever you don't want to have hit. So this is really ensuring that you're going to have the best, most accurate data right off the bat without having to remember to go back in and change any values back to how they originally were. So again, like I said, this is definitely a big hit. It's very easy to use, very intuitive, and it's best for your data. So, and really with that, that covers much of the, or pretty much all of the grid changes that have been made overall. And I know that I was, working just within work with retailers in this case. Any of the functionality that you saw today exists within any of the grids. So work with orders will look the same. It'll have the locked columns, the same view process, same update multiple, opening to a specific section, all that stuff. Same thing with work with products. Literally any grid will have this same functionality. So I don't know if there are any questions right off the bat here.
Hey, Justin, this is
Yep.
John Dryberg. On the update multiple, is that still limited to 1,000 records at any time?
It is.
Okay.
It is still limited to 1,000 records at this point in time.
So I had a question about the sorts. Isn't there some enhancement to the sorting function?
Yep, that's actually a really good point. I apologize for not bringing that up. So the way that the sorting will work is all you have to do is click on what you want to sort on, whatever heading. So if I click on DBA name, you'll see that it's now showing that I'm sorting by DBA name, and this is going to go in alphabetical order. If I click on it again, then we'll sort it in the opposite manner. I want to clear a sort, I can just come over here and click X, and it will clear that sort. Anything else for today?
I think that covers this one.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.